and to then see my own sort of memory of what happened through this different lens.
Yeah.
And I think that just, was a little kind of stimulus. And then I had Annie's voice in my head of like, you could probably dig deeper.
Yeah.
And then I like really dug deep.
Yeah.
And I remember writing the song, like the process was pretty wild because I was like crying about it so hard that I couldn't sing properly. I was like on the floor, like just with some paper and a pen, writing down lyrics. I think I had a chord progression in mind, but I'm not totally sure. It was very like lyric driven, which is unusual for me. And like and I remember thinking, I don't know if I'll ever be able to play this song to anyone. And now it's one of the songs on the album. So I've just had to, I didn't even really go through much of a process. I sort of just like put it on the album and then realized that, oh, well, okay, wow, everyone's going to hear it now.
Sorry, I didn't make it definite. We are going now.
This is the podcast.
This is the podcast. I was saying, I saw Fergo the other day and recorded one, and because like as soon as I opened the car door, we're kind of just like, we just start going deep into something.
Oh, yeah.
And I was trying to think of a way to like be recording as I arrived. Because otherwise there's always this point where it's like I've set up, everyone's ready to go, but I don't know when to be like,
oh my God.
Well, we can start now, even though we're talking already. It's
I feel like
tricky.
Half the podcasts I listen to start with the people saying, oh yeah, we were just talking about this thing before we started recording. Like, and they're like,
can I hear
did
that
we say
bit?
that? Like, did we say that before we started recording? After?
Yeah. It's always tricky. But yeah, I just kind of get going and then
okay.
See, I'll pick a starting point. But yeah, whatever. But yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I found there was one internal battle I had while I was as a listener. Nothing to do with what you were doing.
At the concert last night.
Yeah. Nothing to do with what you were doing. I was just like, how would I film a live concert and record it?
God.
Because like, it's a fucking hard thing to do and super tricky as like, because you're leading it. It's like, I could see a couple of times where, it was sort of like you switched into like, this is live performance mode and nothing changed really. It was just like, you became very focused with what you were doing and then did it. And then straight after when you sort of, I could see that you're like, that felt really good.
Yeah.
You like relaxed again and started venting again, which is so, so interesting because it's like, it's similar to like recording music or something where it's like, okay, we're recording now.
You're trying to make it authentic. Yeah. But
without it being like, what's the word? Like scripted in any way or like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like, I thought you navigated it really well.
I think probably like what made that possible was that just at least half of the audience were my extended family and like very old friends.
Yeah.
Like you were in the front row.
Yeah.
And just like the fact that we could be like, oh, should we just like fake some applause right now? And everyone's like, everyone's so excited to.
And being comfortable asking.
Like that, simulate. It's to simulate a live show.
Yeah.
And we're all on board with like just the necessity for that.
Yes.
So that was cool. And I think the other reason it was more easy to make that work, assuming, I'm hoping it did work, yet to see the video. Okay.
Yeah, I reckon it did.
Was because I got so sick the week before and, was like really in panic mode when I was like still coughing up phlegm and my cellos were broken and my bed broke, like just everything broke. Just like nothing.
Your body broke.
Nothing was working. And so I kind of like, I think I got to this point where I really was, just so ecstatic that I could even make it through a whole song without coughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then that became like the bar.
Yeah.
And also because I'd been working so hard on my vocals all week to just be able to sing it all.
Yeah.
Then a lot of people were saying, oh, your voice sounded even better than normal. So I was like, well, that's ironic.
Yeah, that's wild. Hey,
Yeah.
I wonder if that lead up was like, I don't know. I always like reading these things in the, in like an esoteric way, but like, that could have been the perfect lead up.
I know. Yeah, sometimes like, disaster is perfect.
Yeah, like you kind of just like, cool, we did it. We got through it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's, I don't know, maybe a bigger appreciation for the things that are working well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought you navigated it really well because that would have been so tricky, especially because there was like particular songs you wanted to capture.
Yeah.
They were filming everything in the second set, which was, I thought, a great decision regardless because I loved that David Bowie cover.
Thanks.
Blew my mind. So good. But yeah, I thought that, it was just so interesting. Like also them as well, because like,
oh yeah, the film crew,
like Vanessa and Tania, like legends. I love all of Vanessa's work. It's just always like so stunning.
Yeah.
And
her just manner, like, and way of, there's just this like joy that comes out of her all the time, just, like, and it feels authentic
the entire time when she's filming it. I was like glancing at her and she's like like yes. But she works with heaps of musicians, so it's like I feel like it seems like a lot of music people kind of head into video at some point or another, but there was a big understanding of what the way that they needed to act and react to what you were doing.
Yeah, huge mutual respect, I think.
For sure, yeah. And I feel like that
such
makes
alchemy.
Makes it so much easier, I feel. Because sometimes, like, I feel like there's certain people that are filming stuff that don't really understand those, like...
feels a bit more clinical.
Yeah, those are, like, unspoken pressures as well as a performer that they might be, like, addressing something that's, like, they can solve that they don't. Oh my God,
I just remembered the moment when Ingrid, my sister, called out, wait, do you want your glasses still on? It's just like, I love that moment when we went into the filming mode and suddenly everyone was kind of co-creating this situation to the point where someone from the audience is going to yell out like, wait, you're still wearing glasses.
Do you want this in the shot? Yeah, everyone was there for it. And I feel like you also set that up in the perfect way because Georgia didn't know that at all.
Oh, really?
I just like bought tickets when you emailed. I was like, fuck yeah, I want to be there.
Cool.
And...
I love that there were like still some randos last night who don't even know what a normal Monique Clare show is like. And then this is like me with my extended family. Like not being like I was still keeping it somewhat stage-like. But it was,
It was, I loved it, because it was just like so unhinged in the best way possible. And I feel like everyone, was there for it.
I think that's like... something that I'm just leaning into more and more, like even without that situation, like without half the audience being my extended family and without it being like this strange like live filmed gig, like this is something that just makes music feel so much more sustainable for me. Is basically making my live shows more and more unhinged and keeping them like as real as possible, as close as possible to how I would be in like normal life, so that I just feel like allergic to being, I don't want to say fake because there's definitely heaps of times where I'll still like put on I don't know, what do you say, like a voice or a persona, like just like a way of presenting. Sure. And I think everyone does that, like to kind of just blend in with whatever situation they're in to a certain extent. But I feel allergic to like putting on a persona that's polished. Because that is like one thing that I've never been. I've never been polished.
Who wants to be though?
But I think some people are good at it. Yeah, like virtuosic really players. Like I love like Punch Brothers. I love how polished their show is, and I think that's genuinely who they are as people. They have that like level of fascination and detail. And like, you know, other like if you went to a Beyonce show, like or Taylor Swift show. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I personally would pay extra money for Beyonce and Taylor Swift to do a solo show where they like really talk about
Yeah,
the
that would be
songs
sick.
in between, like
Yeah.
almost folk music style.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Yeah.
really cool. But it's also like the pop music performance style, I think also has like so much value in how polished it is and how much of
Yeah.
an extravaganza it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like, adding this extra level of theatricality, but
It's a different
in a
art form.
creative way.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
in like a, some things are like, look at me, but a lot of the time it's like, how can we just like amp the fuck out of this music to make everyone feel like really excited?
Yeah, take it to
visually
the
as
next
well.
level.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
I think that's what live music like always has to be. It has to be taking, well, good live music is taking whatever's been recorded to the next level, either by like diving deeper into it or showing a different version of it, or like, making explosions on stage.
Yeah. Like, have you seen that new Beyonce documentary?
No,
Netflix?
I haven't.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
it's good.
It's about her Coachella set after
Okay.
she comes back from having
Yeah.
the twins.
Okay.
Holy fuck. It's
Okay.
just like,
I'll watch it.
it's just, it's so, I was like not expecting to be so inspired by it.
Oh, no.
Even though she's like an incredible woman and musician and everything like that. Yeah, just like the dedication that she's putting into like,
Oh
she
my
just
God,
spends so much time on every detail, even though it's like this $3 million
These
show.
like
It's
pop
crazy.
stars are so, it's not even that they're so talented, it's like their skill set is just like rock solid. And it's not like, if you go through a classical training, do your Bachelor of Music, like you end up with just such an opposite sort of skill set to that. And it's sometimes hard for people to see that people in the pop world are working just as hard, if not a lot harder.
Yeah.
And they are actually incredibly skilled and unique.
Yeah.
And that's why they are achieving this level of fame.
No one gets there by like coasting.
No.
I think that's like a perception that I had
my God,
during
yeah.
classical music school.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, they're not fucking trying. Like,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
actually, they're trying so hard and
And a lot of that's below the surface until you watch these kind of documentaries and see that.
yeah, like it was just crazy to see how much time she was, like she started rehearsals like, this is like 2 nights, right, of this show.
Yeah.
And they were rehearsing for like 3 to 6 months before in like a studio set,
God.
like a, you know, where they like shoot a movie or something.
Yeah.
Just with like dancers, all the music.
Yeah.
And she's just spending like every day there.
Yep.
I'm just like, for
Yep.
2 nights of shows that were like stunning, but yeah, worth watching for sure. But it like, it just reinforced that thought of like, no, these people are trying so hard. It's just not in the same place that we like when we
it is
studied,
a
it's
different
very
job.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was like doing some stage managing at the con recently, and they're doing this like pop music showcase because like all the pop people have come up from the coast. They're all at the con now.
Yeah.
And crazy to see these students performing. It was just like they each sang a song with like a group and a band and blah blah. But like they were like doing all the things that we're seeing all the crazy big people do in terms of performing.
Yeah.
That I would just like never contemplate doing, just with like just things like soloing, like stage movement and like
the sort of
facial
choreography of
expressions
it.
and
Like beyond dance, it's like the actual like navigation of the stage and
and like working with lighting plots and like all this shit that is like so taken for granted when we see something like a giant show like that. But they'd been rehearsing for a week. But yeah, I was just blown away.
I'm totally just waiting for like the majority of the classical world that, you know, we're still somewhat part of to really learn from that. And I think to embrace like you know, I guess pop music isn't necessarily very human, but to embrace the level of like engagement that that brings. And, you know, I think every genre has its own style of engaging.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I think maybe classical music needs to evolve from the tradition that it's been in is because it's, you know, in this day and age, it's still trying to, well, it's trying to appeal to a viable audience of kind of everyday people. It's hoping to, but everyday people live in this time.
Yeah.
And, you know, and in earlier times, like, I think we really did have so many more strict rules about, you know, social rules and etiquette and protocols to follow. And I think, you know, the demographic that classical music was for was often like the upper class.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so in the way that we're presenting it now, it really needs to take some cues from pop music and folk music in like, how do you take this art form and then actually translate it? And that has to involve talking about the pieces that you're going to play and making it personal and
giving
human.
Context. I think context is everything in those shows.
Or like we've seen in some classical concerts, bringing that more pop element of like the theatrics of it, like incorporating other art forms like video displayed on the screen. Oh, did you happen to see there was a concert at the Con that was the Birrelly Choir and I think it was the Con Orchestra.
Right.
And it was a project about people who'd lost their vision, and they commissioned a painter to like paint the scene of one of the last most meaningful scenes that one of these blind people had seen with their eyes before they really lost their vision. And
I
then
didn't see it, no.
it was amazing. They commissioned an Australian living composer to write a piece for the orchestra and you know, maybe the choir as well.
Yeah.
And so it brought together like living Australian composers, living Australian artists, and then all of these young people who are coming up through this orchestral training. And they would have the people who the songs were written about in the audience, and they would like stand up and everyone would kind of applaud them.
Wow.
That's right. The Griffith Film School was also involved in creating like a little mini documentary about each person to tell their story.
Yeah.
And then they would display the artwork on the screen behind the orchestra while it was happening.
Oh my God.
And I just was stimulated in my brain the whole way through the concert. I never once got bored, which is unheard of for me. Like totally unheard of. And I know it would have taken so much more energy to make that all happen than a normal concert. But it was just like, to me, it was like the pinnacle of what classical concerts can be in this day and age.
Yeah, for sure. So much to unpack there.
I know. I just realized we're talking about classical music performance when like...
Okay. It happens sometimes.
Yeah. It's a
Most
little bit
people
irrelevant.
who I chat to who have done a classical degree have some form of trauma. So I've kind of become this like counselor for classical musicians on this podcast.
Okay, first up we just do a little rant about classical music.
We'll kind of just get our feelings out, and then we can
Yep.
talk about our own practice. But yeah, no, I agree. It needs to be modernized. There needs to be stories attached to it. I think it's become, in the last like 30 to 50 years, this sort of emotionless replication and reproduction of like the old dead white people.
I'm just visualizing all the people who are working hard to make it not that, being like what about me? And I want to say acknowledge that there are people who are like definitely not emotionless, but I know what you're saying too.
Yeah, like I could go like I always get a bit worried that I'm like shitty on classical music, but I'm not.
This is like us being kind of still in classical music.
Yeah, so we're allowed to.
It's like when you grow up Catholic and you're allowed to.
You're allowed to shit on religion. Then I feel like it is like I've had to unlearn a lot of things from my degree, but I also learnt a lot of things that I still carry with me very presently when I play music and when I approach music and think about music. So there's always like good and bad stuff. But I just feel like it's sort of become this thing where it's, I don't know, some of the orchestras are trying harder than others. I would say ACO is sort of leading the way a lot of the time with just like bringing things into the 21st century.
Yeah, they're definitely not in this emotionless category.
But then you think about like Richard as a person, as an artist and a creative director, it's like, of course he's doing that with that ensemble. Whereas I just feel like some of the other orchestras, because they're so big and they're like these giant entities. It's like, who's actually, other than the artistic director or conductor, normally they're both, they're the same person. It like, and the orchestra members. And it's like, you look at some of these people that are still playing in there and it's just like, I bet you don't even listen to any kind of pop music or any kind of music that's like not within this sphere. And you're not being challenged, maybe. I'm just like generalizing super hard, but I don't know. I've heard some pretty horrible stories of, I won't name names, but like a certain conductor that led a certain orchestra in the city that we're living in, was basically like driven out because from all the orchestra members that were sort of principals because they didn't agree with that person's vision. Because it was too modern.
That's a shame.
And I feel like it was some of the best. They programmed, I'm using non-binary terms just because I don't like, anonymity. You know, but it was just sad because I thought the orchestra played like really like in a different way than what they were used to for a long time. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of up to the players that are in it. It's kind of up to like who's steering the boat. And I think there's still a lot of fear of breaking that mold because it worked for so long. But it's I don't know. Also, because they're businesses, it's like the way that they earn money is playing film scores at the fucking Brisbane Entertainment Centre. And that actually translates to a lot more people than just like
because there's a story attached to it and another visual component.
And that's rad. I think that's cool. And
I did watch I watched, because my sisters were involved in it. This is another Beryl Lee concert.
Cool.
And it was the cinematic one that QSO does. So many, like, I'm pretty sure every single orchestral player who did this concert dressed up as one of their favorite movie characters. And there was just like so much joy in the room. And I kind of got the sense that like, I mean, I can't, assume for every single player on the stage that they were like loving it, but it did feel like they were having a good time. And I feel like that's been a change because maybe if someone had suggested that 20 years ago, there would be some
be like, what?
Like, oh no, we're serious. We don't do that. That's just, cheesy music.
And I think like, film composition in general has kind of become the bridge between classical music and contemporary music.
That's the space where it really still thrives and always makes sense.
Because a lot of the time it's like led by a film composer that is somewhere in the middle of all of that, who like might play electric guitar but then and plays in a band but also like studied composition or like whatever, and like I don't know, people like Johnny Greenwood and like and Hilda who wrote Joker film score, and like people like that are like bridging this classical training with contemporary sounds and experimental music and all this stuff. So I feel like that would, once that kind of filters into the general approach of orchestras, I feel like that would make a big impact.
For sure.
It's hard.
So that's orchestras.
It's orchestras.
What else do you want to talk about?
Maybe your music.
Okay. Maybe we should move on to jazz.
Let's analyze each major genre
that I know
of music.
Nothing about.
So you did this filming of a live set last night, and you also did this giant tour, which you kind of spoke a little bit about. We don't have to go into but I can kind of imagine, just by the way that you're sort of you mentioned a few things last night, how that would have felt, and that would have been tricky. Maybe just to quickly jump back to that, the Unhinged Monique concerts, which I am loving, by the way. And Georgie was chatting to me last night about it, of just how inspired she was by the way that you approach playing music.
That's so cool.
Because
it's really cool to just like hold that thought. It's cool to think about the lineage of that. Like when I look back to each and every concert that I've witnessed that has opened up those possibilities to me.
Yeah.
And just it's cool to then think that doing it myself is maybe unlocking doors for other people.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Because she's like struggled a bit with, because she's classical training. So, being very serious and kind of not knowing exactly what to say and not wanting to like unmask super hard and kind of be herself in that zone, because there is a lot of people that like don't know her and that can be tricky sometimes. And that sort of thing. And more I'm like hearing songs about your neurodivergent journey, and I'm hearing songs about like, you've always written about your life in your songs, but I feel like they're getting really, really like well articulated with the feelings that you're kind of translating through your lyrics and things like that. So maybe like, is there within that journey, so you're saying that it's sort of taken a while to kind of get to that place. Has that just come from like you playing more and just kind of, and how you're like moving through life and kind of exploring those things and understanding them more? Are they just like locked in terms of how that's operating, or is it more conscious than that?
Sort of feels like you're playing a video game, and and you like unlock things as you get through it. Yeah, for sure. I can think of like two possible main ways to answer that. One was this very like focused moment during the residency that I did in Banff in Canada, the Centre for Arts. Yeah. And this fellow songwriter called Annie, she was listening through some of the songs that I'd been writing on this residency so far. And she was sort of like, they're like lovely, they're great. I feel like, you could probably dig deeper.
Yeah, right.
And I just remember being like, what? How? And I really hit like a wall after that. I remember just not being able to write much after that. And so I kind of just like gave up for a hot moment, and I watched a film. I chose this like artsy black and white film called Rosa. And it was a very like heavy topic and slightly relatable. Like watching it just reminded me of like a past moment in my life, and it was interesting to watch it from the perspective of someone outside the story. Yeah. And to then see my own sort of memory of what happened through this different lens. Yeah. And I think that just, was a little kind of stimulus. And then I had Annie's voice in my head of like, you could probably dig deeper. Yeah. And then I like really dug deep. Yeah. And I remember writing the song, like the process was pretty wild, because I was like crying about it so hard that I couldn't sing properly. I was like on the floor, like just with some paper and a pen, writing down lyrics. I think I had a chord progression in mind, but I'm not totally sure. It was very like lyric driven, which is unusual for me. And like and I remember thinking, I don't know if I'll ever be able to play this song 21, and now it's one of the songs on the album, so I've just had to, I didn't even really go through much of a process. I sort of just like put it on the album and then realized that wow, everyone's gonna hear it now. Too late. I can't really take that back. So that's pretty wild to like to put something out there without really the concept of literally anyone in the world can now listen to this story that I'm telling, and I can't take it back. Yeah. That's just bananas. But that's one way that, that door was unlocked for me. But I also think it's just as straightforward as, you sort of like get through like the early topics of just like heartbreak. And then, there's only so many heartbreak songs you can write, and then you move on to the next thing. And I think a lot of other people get by or get through that by starting to tell other people's stories.
Yeah,
and I have
sure.
done a little bit of that, but I think because I spend so much of my life trying to figure out what's going on in my own head, that is where my thoughts are most of the time. And you just, write from what you know.
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
and I think what's really gratifying and relieving at the end of the process is that there are so many people that relate to the songs, and also relate to the way that I perform and talk from the stage, that it suddenly becomes this incredibly therapeutic thing for me to write this content and to speak in this way on stage. And it's also helpful for other people, which is kind of a magical alchemy.
For sure.
And much more sustainable than what I used to try and go for.
Yeah. And it's sort of, I guess, linking into what you were saying before, where you sort of had to like add other elements to sort of cover up those things, like when you're performing. But I feel like a lot of those are kind of being...
just taking it away.
A lot, you know.
Sweeping out cobwebs.
Yeah. And I feel like because I hadn't seen you play for a little while, until that Triffid show with Joe, I don't know how long it would have been, but it would have been probably, I don't even know.
I mean,
years,
there was a whole
maybe.
pandemic in the middle of that.
Like I don't think I've seen you play post that, maybe. I can't remember. But it felt like a really long time. And I felt like there was just this like, it was like, honestly, like quite emotional to watch you and hear you sing and play. I don't know why. It just really struck me. I guess because I'm like in the middle of that whole, like the whole journey of figuring
things
what
out.
the fuck my brain is doing.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of how many times I've come close to quitting music for various reasons, and how especially post-pandemic, when like even, I mean, what are we now? We're in right now it's November 2023.
Yeah.
And the pandemic sort of, I mean, people still getting COVID now, so it hasn't like, it's hard to say when it's ended, but like,
the giant craziness.
Yeah. We were all kind of like doing gigs and trying to do normal things definitely by 2022, if not a little bit earlier. So it's already been like almost 2 years of like post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But the music industry's never been so like, what's going on?
I know, right?
Everyone's talking about it. Like no one seems to be free from this weirdness that's in it at the moment.
Yeah.
So like, I think post-pandemic, I just don't have any kind of bandwidth to be doing this career unless I get to do it on my terms, because otherwise I'm just out.
Yeah, I feel that completely. And I feel like you're someone that has explored a lot of the other options out there as a musician. I'd love to talk about that as well.
I've done lots of different music jobs.
For sure.
Yeah.
Or had people do the jobs and they not
necessarily I've
work
experienced
out,
delegating tasks and having people on my team, that kind of thing, for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to get into that as we go on, because it's something that I feel is not discussed as much as it probably should be.
It's not very open because it's very
people
not taboo, but
burning bridges or something. Or, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's ways of talking about it without being specific or anything.
For sure. Yeah, you don't have to call people out.
No.
But it was just kind of really struck me the way in which you were talking about songs, but kind of also just you've worked on your voice heaps in terms of like just focusing in on it more. I heard many more things going on.
I don't do it as much as in an ideal world, but when I do get like sort of a rush of enthusiasm about vocal work, oh my gosh, I just get so excited about it. It's just one of the most interesting things to me in late times. And, you know, when I did this kind of huge road trip up to Cairns and back to Brisbane by myself in the middle of this year, it was probably the best trip that I've ever been on.
Awesome.
Just in my little red car driving up to Cairns.
That's great. Yeah.
Along all of these like winding back roads and things. And just something I would do at some point every day when I was starting to get sick of like podcasts and new albums and stuff like that. I would just put on this album. I mentioned this at the gig last night.
Yeah.
It's an album called Cello Drones for Intonation and Improvisation or something like that. And it's just like these sort of drones that just play for a really long time. And I just love putting that album on and just kind of like doing vocal play around each drone. And like something that I am so into at the moment is just singing the same note and just like holding it as long as I can.
That's awesome.
And then changing one thing about it, like changing the vowel sound or the kind of like position of my larynx or something like that. And then holding that for a really long time.
That's awesome.
I'm just obsessed with that.
Is it like stimmy to do?
It's very like calming.
Is it like a practice thing?
It is,
or is it just like
it's like a
also fun?
Meeting point between practice, because I'm really focused on improvement. So it's because, I mean, I've always had this issue with holding notes without them wavering. So that's why I started doing, like, I remember the first time I started doing this was on all the way back at like a National Music Camp. No, it was an AYO season. So I used to play in the Australian Youth Orchestra and you know, you'd have some time off where maybe you could go off and practice. And I think I just remember like being in a room where there was a piano and just pressing the same piano key over and over again. So I had this constant reference of the right pitch. And I'd realized that I couldn't sing the vowel air, like an E pronounced like air, without the note wavering up and down in pitch.
Okay.
So it was like, you know, like really not stable. And I don't know what's going on with that, but I just practice like holding the note and trying to do as many variations on it as possible. And like now I can do it. Like there's a song on the album, Making a Soup. It's like, look at this mess. Like I have to hold an S sound for ages. Probably wave it a bit just then I haven't warmed up or anything.
Nice.
So that probably was 10 years ago.
Right.
But I keep coming back to it because there's always more to explore with it.
That's really interesting. It's sort of like, I feel like a lot of people who are sort of solo performers or like, I don't know, musicians in general, I've found, and I can relate to that in terms of like developing practice regime exercises, but are so specific to your like idiosyncrasies as a performer.
Leaning into your own interests within the whole world of music. And how that kind of does turn you into quite a unique musician with something to offer.
Because if you zoom out, it's like I'm practicing how to hold a long note on this particular vowel with this drone, and I'm doing that every day. It's like, and that's not crazy to me, but to other people it might be like, wow, that's like boring. Really intense.
It's so boring. But I'm like, no, it's so interesting.
I know, right? And I find that really interesting just because same like different practice things, but like working on particular things that are so specific, but they start off as a very specific thing that I might not be able to get going or something, or I've noticed like a deficit in that technique or something. And then I start working on it, but then that whole world kind of just like explodes into this giant big thing to go into. Drones are great for that as well. Sure. It's just like
really sucks your brain.
There's so many different things you could train, like intervals or like texture.
I know. That's why I love them, because it just you can start off by just trying to sing the same note as the drone. Like that's as simple as it can be. I mean, actually, as simple as it can be is like sometimes I'll like press play and I'll just do breathing exercises. So I don't even need a drone on for that, but there's something just very focused about it that makes me just want to start working on my voice.
I see.
Like I don't know, maybe it's a good cue or something, or just something that, you know, is like a laser beam feeling.
Yeah.
And then, just holding the same note. But then by the end of like, you get bored of holding the same note and suddenly you're onto doing like runs and holding like a semitone above, or, you know,
Yeah, it's wild. Once I started getting into drones, like in terms of like ambient music or even just creating drones, I instantly started understanding like North Indian music way more.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I'm like, oh my God.
Such a niche thing to say.
Yeah.
That's like one of the most Caleb College things to say.
But I mean, like, it's just like there's a drone going on the entire time in ragas, you know.
Yeah, true.
But
it's really true.
But like kind of different because it's like they're building tension release through rhythmic elements, not necessarily through melodic elements. So
it's all
hence the drone.
Both.
But,
But
I just instantly kind of was like, I get that now.
Yeah.
Not like I understand anything more about it. Just more so like I understand why this happens because it's so stimulating.
Yeah.
And
it makes so much sense as a progression.
Yeah.
Like just even though this sort of like self-made Western brain way of using drones to practice, I am starting off with something that really hugs the drone and moves slowly. And then as time goes on, it gets faster and faster. And like that kind of is the same flow of a raga. Like
for sure.
Wait, no, ragas? What is a raga?
Raga's like for different times of the day.
Oh, okay. Then what do you call the piece? Like, is that just a piece?
I think it's a like raga.
You still call it a raga? Oh, so it kind of has two meanings. It can be like piece itself.
Yeah, I've gone like deep into that sort of thing. I've done a bit of like rhythmic stuff.
Sure.
With Thala and stuff. But
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. Yep. Yeah, where it's just like that idea of easing into something and then becoming more active, you know. Super interesting how that works. How you just sort of develop your own practice. But like I didn't really understand that in uni, and so because I was like, I need to practice this piece and get it like so I can play the notes correctly in time.
There's not a lot of play.
No.
Yeah.
Until I started improvising, then I started realizing like, oh, you can just do whatever you want
if
you want to.
I mean, it is cool like when you go through times of your life where you have to kind of abide by this set of rules and things that are imposed by other people. Yeah. I think that there's a limit to when that is helpful, and the way that education is at the moment, a lot of people agree that it's not great. I think pretty much everyone's on board with that idea. It's really not working super well. So it's not that radical to say that like the amount of kind of structure and rules imposed is it goes beyond being this helpful structure.
Sort of inhibiting.
And it starts inhibiting and like very slowly traumatizing, like not in this sense of having like missiles raining down on your building, but like just slowly shutting down parts of your you-ness that would otherwise allow you to like navigate the world successfully and rise to the challenges that life throws at you.
Yes.
Because you've then shut down so much of yourself and you're trying to do it in the way that other people have told you to.
Yes.
And that just straight up doesn't work. So I think,
I
but having said that, like both you and I have both gone through these degrees where a lot of it was, ideas imposed and structures imposed that we don't love.
No, it was mostly that, but
it's cool to like have a phase like that, and then because you feel more motivated to do it your own way once you're free of that.
Yeah, I think if I didn't do that, I'd probably be at a bit of a loose end. Yeah. In a bad way. In terms of like, it reinforced that I could do certain things.
It clarifies what you do want to do.
And I know that I could play a piece if I practiced it and I understand what to do.
That was a cool thing about last night for me, was like actually putting together, it wasn't even a whole piece, just a movement, but like pretty hefty
It was hefty.
Hefty
yeah.
dude of a moment.
Yeah.
Hefty dude of a movement.
Yeah.
And I think it's like incredibly empowering to be like, oh my God, I have that in my toolbox still. That's really cool.
That was, I loved that movement. Yeah. I was very excited when you're like, I'm going to play some classical music.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I feel like, you've got that in your toolkit kind of thing. And I like when you whip it out.
Yeah.
I get really excited because it's like you play the shit out of the pieces that you choose. Like,
it's a much more empowered way for me to do classical music.
Yeah, because it's like on your terms.
Yeah, and it's just one little blip in the context of other songs that are very like personal and emotional.
Yeah.
And,
I feel like that also, because I think that's the first time that I've kind of heard you play. Like I saw your graduating recital where you played that piece and a few other things.
True.
And because I'd only known you from Mulberry by then, because I think we were playing in Mulberry when you came across to the con or something.
That was pretty much exactly
the last year.
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, right.
And then I must have graduated at the end. No. Must have been 2014.
Yeah, right.
And then graduated at the end of 2015. So I did 2 years at the con.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we must have been playing by then. But I remember, like I knew you played classical music, but I just never had heard you play in a solo recital before, and we're playing in a band every week.
Yeah.
And so I remember that blowing my mind. And it's just interesting that it's sort of like, hearing you play that last night was like, it's such a I don't know if you'd want to do it all the time, but that's cool. But as a audience member, I was like, this just shows this whole other, not that you have to show every side of you when you play a concert, but I just mean like it showed this side of like you can play this music and it just makes everything that you do like it gave me some more context that I hadn't had before. I don't know why.
I guess I mean, I sort of designed the set order in this way. Like I wanted to play that piece before playing Hourglass to kind of show the links between it with the harmonics. Yeah. I was just thinking while you were saying that. Have you been keeping up with Richard Eggleston on like Instagram?
Yeah, here and there.
Okay, so this is a cellist.
I go through phases.
Yeah, so there's only so much you can take.
Yeah.
Richard's a cellist, classically trained originally, but always loved heavy metal music. Like he's gone through so many genre phases, and he's like, I think he's probably one of the best cellists in the whole world.
I agree.
If you went to his Instagram right now and watched what he's doing.
Yeah.
In fact, this is like a lot of the comments he receives, like from people who are like just stumbling across him.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, what is that guy doing to the cello? And people be like, oh, I could do that. And I'm like, oh my God, actually, no, you couldn't.
Yeah,
what he's doing on the cello is this very complex technique with the bow that he's been working on. Like I think we were seeing him working on it for about 3 years before he could really do everything that he wanted to. It's like this bouncy bow style that he's got. Yeah. And it's a perpetual bounce. And it's not horizontal, like dragging the bow across the string. It's sort of like this vertical anyway. And it's so funny because he's really down that rabbit hole at the moment. Yeah. And he seems to be obsessed with like doing stunts while doing bouncy bow and then screaming in his made up language. Like that's his shtick at the moment. Yeah. Whereas like he could easily whip out like a whole suite of classical Bach. If he wanted to. Yeah, for sure. And it's just so funny. It's interesting to see how much he doesn't care that people don't know that about him.
Yeah. I dig
just
that.
His depth and capacity.
Yeah.
He's he just lives his art.
His truth.
His truth,
for sure. Yeah.
Whoa.
He's inspiring, that guy. Yeah.
And a little scary.
It's pretty intense. I go through periods of watching like every video he posts and then I have to unfollow him for a little bit and just be like,
can't do this.
I need to chill out. It's that bouncy bow technique is very like, as a drummer, I relate really hard to it because it's like you can get a perpetual it's called push-pull technique.
Yep.
Where one movement helps the other movement, and then it just keeps going. We didn't learn that technique.
Okay.
I'm starting to teach myself it now, but it's really hard. But very similar idea where it's like sort of this cyclical motion in terms of the approach, not necessarily in the technique. But yeah, I love it because it's just like, as a percussionist, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And then like the balancing, standing on the cello thing is just like next level. Like, don't try it at home, kids. It's so crazy.
Oh, and he's gone super aquatic with his cello now.
Yes.
He'll just jump into rivers with his cello now. And it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
nuts.
Richard.
Yeah.
We've done orchestras, we've done Richard.
Like check that dude out.
Richard Eggleston.
Yeah, it's next level.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like every classical musician should sort of see that.
Yeah.
Like when they're starting.
Yeah. And he, like, back when I came across what he was doing, his main two things was he had a heavy metal band called Tornado Rider. And so that part, I think, you know, it was inspiring in that it was like, wow, you know, you can really do anything with a cello. Like, you can hang upside down from the top of a marquee and like take a solo while the rest of the band is playing. But the other like side of his life at that point was he was still sometimes playing cello with this like Celtic fiddle player called Hanneke Castle. And some other, you know, some like American fiddlers. You know, he was really involved in the fiddle folk scene. And he would do the like very like, still compared to classical music, like quite raucous and non-classical progressive stuff. But it was still very refined and really nice to listen to, just like very groovy, rhythmic, and sort of vertical. Like it wasn't playing a melody so much, it was like playing chords on the cello and incorporating percussive bowed techniques into that. And like that was absolutely foundational for me for like what I now do with songwriting. Is it pretty much all stems from the fact that Hanneke, that fiddle player that he was playing with, she came to Australia, she was playing some shows, they needed a cellist. So like I was like one of the only cellists at that time that was able to do these techniques.
And hanging in that
so
zone.
I was just in straight away. And I had to learn like this whole you know, hour-long kind of repertoire of her tunes and the accompaniments. And a lot of it was like watching these videos of Richard doing the techniques, like crossing over all the different strings with these chord shapes, and emulating exactly what he was doing with his bow. And then, you know, once I'd like graduated classical music, went to America to like take in more folk music, more traditional fiddle music, and came home from that and like suddenly wanted to write songs. It was absolutely just pulling those fiddle tune accompaniment techniques that had been pioneered by Richard Eggleston and then bringing them into the more indie folk songwriting world. That's the lineage of that.
For sure.
It's so cool. And now you look up Richard on Instagram and it's like, he was one of my biggest inspirations. And you're like, what? How?
I love that.
Do you scream and just bounce your bow?
Have you developed your own language yet?
Where's your goblin hat at? He doesn't even wear a goblin hat anymore.
No, he's moved on from that. Hey. No, I dig that. And you brought up like a number of things there, which are like, I always know it's a little bit tricky as an artist to talk about your lineage in any sort of way that what am I trying to get at? I don't know. Some people love talking about where they come from, other people don't. But I'd love to just chat a little bit about because we've kind of gone through this arc of like you studied classical music, but you were in the folk scene a lot. Those things have sort of meshed into a place of writing your own songs and touring and performing and things like that. You're someone who, like, ever since I've known you, which has been I don't even know it anymore, probably 10 years maybe.
I'd
something.
say that. Right on.
Right on. Even since I've known you, like, you're someone that has always traveled because of music and have always sort of made that a priority in your life from the outside. like as a friend and observer of your career, meaning that like you have sort of pursued these things that to someone on the outside might be like why are you going there, like as in it makes sense like if you're going to America because you want to learn more about folk music, that makes sense, but you've also like pursued these like residencies. You're also like you've had quite a varied career already,
right? Because I guess there's also like Estonia and Afghanistan.
Yeah, like there's so many things that you like I'm just
each one of them just kind of made sense in the moment.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
It was sort of just, oh, this is happening now.
Yeah.
I think it's more because I haven't really questioned it. It's like I do get overwhelmed by decision making, and so when something is just kind of offered or made clear that it's one of the only options, then I'll just go with it. And, you know, like Estonia, that was because my cello teacher at the time told me about these scholarships that were available to go on a music exchange specifically. And there were only 4 countries to choose from. And for some reason, I just like ruled out the other 3 and was left with Estonia.
Yeah, love that.
And then the Afghanistan, you know, my friend just like called me up and was like, hey, we need someone to fill in for this person going to Afghanistan to teach. Do you want to come? Like, it was just as simple as that. And I was like, yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. And I never like set out to really do any of those things. It was often just someone suggesting it. And me being like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like a lot of those things, because let alone like music is the thing that has sort of, I feel like tends to provide a way in with those things. I know when I went to China and out to the
right, we're so
middle
lucky
of the
in
desert
that way.
and stuff. It's like the thing that we connected with anyone that I met anywhere was through music. And
I find it really hard to like travel without music being the reason, because
I go insane if I travel without music.
Firstly, it's a lot more expensive. And secondly, it feels less meaningful, and it's harder to like get a real sense of the culture that you're trying to dive into.
Absolutely.
And when you go for music, you're like inherently going to be meeting, maybe collaborating with or interacting with a lot of people who you're really interested in, and they're really interested in you too. There's this like mutual respect
for sure
that opens up so many doorways into that culture, which is amazing.
I learned that in China for the first time, of like the whole like, we are getting stuff from you as well. I was like, what? I'm like here to learn your music. and it's like that's such a Western idea, but I mean like the idea of like it was an exchange, not a one-sided thing, because it's like an engagement within culture and sharing and that sort of thing. Do you find like approaching the way that you sort of lead your career now, you've found like you've explored these options of like having a manager or hiring a publicist or like having other people book things in certain like to a certain extent kind of vibe. Like you seem in this place now where it's like fairly self-led again. What's brought you to that decision?
I'd say like some of it is this sense of panic and confusion, and then needing to like dial it back down into something that I can control. But so that's maybe the slightly unhealthy side of it that I still want to like understand better and work on, because you can't feasibly go through your whole life without working with other people. If you're doing this kind of career, there's always going to have to be something that you let go of in terms of having control over it, and you have to be able to explain your vision to someone else and hard. Work on a timeline in sync with someone else. But yeah, I think I've had to sort of like regroup after having these experiences. You know, I guess I was very naive in thinking that even despite people telling me that this is not how it works, but thinking that when you add people into your team, that will lessen your workload.
Yeah.
It absolutely doesn't. I think what it did do that was helpful was, especially the first manager I worked with, it was an immense like boost of confidence that sort of helped me to hang on when I was, in a little bit of turmoil around like, I don't know if I feel like I can back myself. I think my main issue at that point was like a lack of self-confidence.
Right.
I still had a lot of energy to make things happen. And that's something that was beautiful that I almost wish I could steal from that time and use now. Because now I have a lot more self-confidence, but a lot less energy. My favorite activity is napping. Like I just froth it. I froth napping so hard. It's my favorite thing. I played a set of music at a TEDx event in Currumbin recently, and one of the speakers was talking about plummeting to the earth with having gone skydiving and a failed parachute.
Oh my God.
A parachute failing to open. And managing, like somehow surviving and
I don't
somehow
understand
walking
how that
again
happens.
after like she became a paraplegic, I think.
Right.
And
then learnt to walk again.
Somehow she was a medical miracle, but she was getting us to kind of really imagine those like last moments where you're falling to the ground. You know that nothing's going to change.
Nothing's going to work anymore.
Nothing's going to work. You are like going to die pretty much. And just like, what would you do if you just had like an extra day or, like if you in that moment knew that you were going to live, what would you do with your life? And in my mind, I was like, probably take some good naps.
Probably get a few naps in.
Probably just have some naps. I just love them. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Like managers and blah, blah, blah. But how you had a lot of energy.
But confidence, needing confidence. It really was meaningful to like have someone approach me and offer to spend time trying to like make my music something that more people would hear. That's just an amazing boost there.
For sure.
So I'm grateful for that, and I think it was probably like a necessary process to go through. It's a shame it didn't work out, but I don't really regret it at all.
That's cool.
And I think also it's helped me clarify what I do enjoy doing by myself.
Right.
And also to clarify, knowing that like I just found it so hard to kind of work on someone else's timeline. That I do actually trust myself to get the job done, like whatever the job is, eventually, and usually in a way that makes more sense than if I'd done it on the supposed due date. And like I've just had press shots done and these live video, like last night we shot the live videos. That would have like if I'd done that like before I'd released my album, then I would have had like beautiful press shots and these live videos to go with the album release.
Right.
Which would have been like the way to do it if I had a manager. But that was just like actually not possible for me at that point. And I also didn't want to not release my album. I didn't want to actually quit music cold turkey. Like I think I'm growing to just trust that like the Monique way is the only way for me to stay in this career. Just like what I said earlier, I have to trust myself. So I think eventually if I do end up, if I did end up with a manager again, it would have to be a very special person who can trust in that chaos. That something really fantastic is going to emerge and something that's more powerful and potent in the long run, even though it's not on the perfect timeline. Or in the way that they're expecting.
For sure. That's there's some big realizations in that, because like that's the general consensus of like the music industry is like more people listening is better.
Yeah.
So do everything that you can to
I think
get there.
Yeah,
And
the
it's
actual best thing to do is to like not go insane.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
to
or
actually
not
stay
quit.
alive.
Not
yeah.
go insane, not quit, and stay alive.
Stay alive. Yeah.
And not like feed, if you have addictive tendencies, like maybe try to stay away from drugs and alcohol if that's something that you want to escape into. Like, I feel like they're like the 4 big things that are so hard to avoid.
There's also
artist.
like just frittering away all your money to the people who claim to be gatekeepers or the ones that will actually make your career work.
Yeah.
And I think, there are genuinely people out there who love going through the motions of like having this very successful career in that a lot of people are listening to their music and they're playing, great festivals like, maybe Splendour in the Grass, Groove in the Mood, like those Australian festivals that are seen as a real sign of success if you're playing them.
Yeah.
But maybe they're still, making a net loss or like...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But they just love the ride so much that that's actually okay with them.
Mm-hmm.
And fair play. Like, I couldn't do it, but there's people out there who can. So great, you do that. But I need to be really good at reminding myself that that's not... I don't even want that. I don't want that. I can't do it.
Yeah.
There's just so many reasons why.
Yeah. I think it's so hard to, like, I've been going through this thing recently of like trying to just acknowledge like the ego's part in my makeup as a human and as an artist, meaning that like obviously everyone has like, if we're like thinking in a psychology sort of realm, it's like with Freud or whatever, talking about like our ego and our super ego and blah blah blah. It just in the sense of like what's healthy about that driving decisions and what's unhealthy about it, in the sense of like I've been struggling a lot I've kind of had this giant breakthrough recently that's been great from like basically from stopping drinking and going to therapy. It's brought up a whole lot of shit, but some really great realizations. But I realized that like I was trying to feed my ego too much in the recent years with my musical pursuits, in terms of trying really hard to like get it to loads of people and considering audience too much, and like all these things are like the worst things to do when you're trying to just like be authentic to yourself when you're making stuff. But like I knew that I was doing that and I was just ignoring myself and just like going against, I'm like fighting myself.
I love that's so relatable to be like strapped in on this like theme park ride that you've created for yourself. Yeah. And you're like, you're watching yourself kind of go along these tracks and like plummet down these steep hills and like go around the bends and all that. And you're like, I'm going to be really dizzy and probably vomit after this, but I'm strapped in like by my own stubbornness. The stubbornness is the kind of tracks and the brace that holds you in place.
For sure.
It's so funny. I just can see myself doing that all the time. Yeah. And I don't know if you feel like this. Maybe you do, like a little bit of trust in the process in terms of the lesson that you learn after that, when you hop off and you're like, maybe not that ride. Yeah. No, that one's not for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was on that ride for maybe like the last 3 years. And so I haven't made a lot. And the things that I have made for certain things have like completely ruined a lot of things. Just because they're like for like competitions or like awards or whatever the fuck, and they just kind of like skew your, at least for me, skew my idea of things. But I had this breakthrough recently of like realizing that I have to embrace like the way that I approach my art making, which is very everything has its like little box a lot of the time.
Okay.
Because like I do a bunch of random shit.
Yeah.
And I like it all.
Yeah.
I've been trying for like a few years to try and like pull that into one thing, into like what is Caleb, or like what is a band name, or what is blah blah blah. And so I was like, well, I guess I have to like write songs and sing them, because that's what like everyone does. And then I'm like, I play drums though, I don't sing. I can kind of sing, but not really. That's not what I want to focus on. And so for ages I was like writing these songs and being like, I'm not even going to sing these. Like, what am I doing? Like, I didn't even get to the part that I was like kind of actively like working on singing it. And so I was just like, wait a second, this is dumb. This is silly. And like, why am I approaching it in this way? And it was just, I realized it's because I'm feeding like the ego part of like, I was wanting to be like the person at the front doing all the shit and being seen to be doing all the shit. When it's like, I work way better when I'm doing all the shit, but like with other people, not necessarily like presenting it all in the way of like it's all me kind of thing. And once I realized that, I was like, cool, I can just make whatever I want and it can go in these boxes and like they're different things. And that's cool, rather than trying to like pull it into this one thing and be like, cool, I'm gonna like
be an entity.
This is gonna be the thing that happens. So that's
a lot of work to like be this one man band kind of thing.
And I just find it tricky just because there's an electronic side and there's like this composition thing, and then like there's drumming stuff and all the other things in between, rather than just like this singular project that's being pushed or whatever. But yeah, it's a tricky thing to like understand until you like the roller coaster thing. It's like until you get off the roller coaster. You get off it. It's
almost got this set timeline. Like, I have to ride this out.
For sure.
And then you're allowed to get off. For some reason.
It's like you've learnt the lesson now.
Okay.
Yeah. For sure. Oh my God.
How good's learning though?
It is good.
It's pretty good.
Sometimes it's hard when you're in the middle of it. Like it's hard
really
to zoom out and be like, I'm going to embrace the lesson. Just like, what the fuck is going on? I feel so, what's the word where you'd sort of like really defend something, not defensive, but like really proud of, like defiantly like holding on to something in a good way. There's a word for that, but I just can't think of it right now. Like doggedness or
protective. I don't know. All I can think of is these words that sound like bad things. But I mean this in a good way of living this life. And I think it's because I know that after many, many years of like trying to be less emotional and trying to be more streamlined and that not working and kind of making things worse. I think, the phase that I'm in is always trying to quite radically accept something and then see what that leads to. At least just to test it. Like, I've never really accepted this way that I do things. So how about, within reason, obviously I can't radically accept like leaving dishes to just stew in the sink for like a week because then the cockroaches like there's a limit to this, but where it's something that's not actually going to cause any harm, or the harm is okay, it's manageable. Just trusting that and seeing, like, running that as an experiment. So I feel really like fiercely proud of living this life that involves a lot of mistakes and a lot of learning and growing from them. Because I've never been able to follow advice.
Same.
I've just never, and my mum was very good when I was, going through primary school or just the whole way through. She was good at realizing that pretty early on and letting me make my own mistakes within an overall sense of safety. Not letting me get like too off the rails, but I really appreciate that, and I think that's what I'm trying to do with myself now. But yeah.
It's do you feel like did that sort of sync up? Maybe not sync up, but like, do you feel like you're getting to that point because there's like, it's too draining to do the other thing?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's just so impossible. And it's like, I know there's a fine line between what I'm talking about and then like defeatism or just laziness, like really just giving up and giving in.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, there's no point bothering.
Yeah.
It's more like, okay, I want to go through the process of embracing it to see what that can lead to. Because I've never tried that before. I've always tried to fit a mold and like, it's exhausting. It doesn't work. It's impossible for me. It just makes me sad. And also like realizing just how many other people are the same way and then are inspired, I guess, or just at least like happy to see someone quite publicly living out that sort of experiment, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
And being like, there's no kind of superiority here. Like the sort of normal way of doing things isn't really the way that everyone does it except me. It's more just like, okay, like most people can probably do it this way. Like maybe just over 50%.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like 40% and then like 20% of people want to do it this way and then 20% want to do it that way and then 10% want to do it this way and like but still 40% is like the biggest like thing where and so that normal way ends up just like being, I know you understand this but I'm just kind of explaining it to get my own head around it. You know, it's like I think people like us have developed a lot of shame around not being able to rise to that challenge.
Yeah.
And there's just so much joy in realizing that there's a whole bunch of people out there who this kind of chaotic way of being is like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You know, we'd all get along quite well.
Yeah.
If we had our own little world.
Yeah.
We'd be like, that's great. Like you were, I don't know, 20 minutes late to this and I was really happy about that.
I think 30 minutes.
30 minutes late. And every time you like sent me an update of like your ETA, I was like, oh, that's good. That gives me another 5 minutes to like, now I can clean the table and now I can put that away. So it like, you know, I wasn't annoyed.
Crazy is like, and I guess for anyone who's maybe like a bit fucking unsure about what we might be referencing is like, so you've got a diagnosis for ADHD.
I have a diagnosis.
I'm booked in for one.
Okay, sure.
But like,
I think it's just fair to say that like most people who end up in the creative arts, are just somewhere on this ladder.
For sure.
It's really not black and white. You have it or you don't. There's just a threshold where you can get diagnosed and where it's causing enough chaos in your life to be clear. You still have
symptoms. You can still experience a lot of things.
And you can still
it,
like allow yourself to dive into resources and learn about it to the point where it's useful to you, even if you know you couldn't get diagnosed.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I just thought I'd throw that out there for context. So like, people being like, I don't want to live.
What's this chaotic life?
Like my life is chaos.
But it's quite a negative word, isn't it? But I also love it. I love chaos.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very exciting. There's always something going on. But what's nuts is like, I was half an hour late, and I was also like, Mon's probably one of the people that is like totally okay with this to a certain extent. Obviously I was like fuck, I hate being late to things, but I'm basically late to everything because I just can't, my sense of time is so fucked. Like I think that everywhere is 10 minutes, but it's not. It's like I live on the other side of the river.
I remember when I used to think that the time of an event starting, which is what I would put in my calendar, was the time that I would have to leave. And that's so funny because like saying that out loud, that is bonkers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like everyone agrees that that's just not, that's impossible. And like as soon as I would say it out loud, it's like, oh, that's, but somehow, and everyone with ADHD like agrees with this experience, or relates to this experience of like the event time is the leave time somehow, because there can only be one time. Whereas somehow everyone else like seems to magically, or not everyone, whatever. Other people seem to just automatically add in the travel time and then the time to get ready. There's like stages to this of learning. Okay, so there's a travel time as well, and then you realize, but even the travel time needs to be expanded because there's the allowance for traffic and and then you start to realize, but even if I have that time in mind with travel time and allowing for an emergency, I'm still going to remember an extra 3 things that I need to get, once I've gotten to the car that I'll have to dash back down to get. So there needs to be at least an extra 5 or 10 minutes there. And then there's even more time blindness on top of that. So like by the time you're like that's a lot of extra time to factor in. And it takes like years and years and years and years and years to learn each one of those little lessons.
And acknowledge that you're not like failing because of that. But like, but
it is kind of like, I think that's, being late is a tricky one for us because there's a lot of shame, and you want to sort of like shrug off the shame and own your like, feel empowered about this way of living, but also like we do have to run on time. So there's got to be some magical way of actually having strategies that make us on time.
Definitely.
But without beating ourselves up about it.
Like I had maps on like an hour before I left.
This is the worst part, is like when you've done all the strategies and then something still goes wrong.
I had maps on. I was watching this Wolfpack like mixing masterclass thing with Jack Stratton. I knew I could watch like the first half an hour module, so I was like, cool. I was taking notes that actually took longer. Had everything packed, like and then just started having a conversation with Georgie, and it was like I was looking at the maps, being like, okay, now I'm late. Like, and I'm still trying to solve the problem and talk about stuff, and I'm like, no, now I'm really And then I was like, cool, I'll take the short way. Which is like the way I always go, which is you cross like Lindum train tracks. But it's like I'm pulling up to Lindum station and I just see all these cranes everywhere. I'm like, oh no, what's going on? They're just doing these major construction works on the railway. I had to take this massive fucking detour all the way around.
And the old us would have been like, I'm late because there was construction on the way. But
I just didn't even tell you. I just kept going. I'm like, I was going to text you then and be like, okay, I'm definitely going to be later than I've said I am. But I was like, I'll see. I'll try and make it up. But no, that doesn't work. Oh my God.
Delusion.
I feel so like within your practice then, like, because I know for me, I'm finding it, I go through these huge phases of being like super into what I'm doing and really focused, and I have the ability to focus on things when they're like really laid out and I know what I'm like ticking off. For example, like it's really hard for me to write like 1 or 2 songs or something, or beats or whatever. But once if I know I'm like wanting to write an album or something, once it'll take me like 6 months maybe, or however long to write those couple, but then the next bunch, because I know what I'm sort of aiming for, and I've got that confidence, I can kind of work through that way easier. That's like a very specific example, but like, how do you find like balancing, because you're organizing a lot of things and you're an independent artist and you're making all of these things happen. How do you find that, like, do you have certain techniques like that you like to juggle, or are you like raw dogging it the entire time, being like, I'll do this now and I'll do this now, which is totally fine. I'm just like interested.
This year has been very raw doggy. And I'm just like amazed that anything happens. And I know something has to change, but it's just been, I think, you know how I mentioned, like, I just love napping all the time.
Yeah,
I think there's a reason for that. I think I'm so tired. I'm so tired of trying.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of that energy was used up during the pandemic in trying to get to America, like trying to get across the Australian border.
Yeah.
And the immense, like, people who like were living a life in Brisbane or in Queensland that was essentially just COVID free and like still, you know, had workplaces to go to and like could kind of pivot to something that made sense. And, you know, you could go visit your family and your friends and all that. Like, man, that was a good situation in terms of like how bad it could be, you know, say Melbourne. That was like a pretty good time as far as it goes. So it's hard to kind of get people to understand how all consumingly awful the pandemic was for me. Because I just like, I don't even really want to go into it. I just want to stress that it was the most like emotionally draining time of my life. And there was so much swimming upstream. It felt like every single day was swimming upstream to like try to make anything happen. And then there was so many instances where I would have worked really hard to make something happen and then it would all fall apart at the last minute. Like, you know, like for example, Lucy and I organised a folk camp and then it just got cancelled at the last minute. Like we kind of got through like the first night of it and then it was slammed shut with lockdown. And so I basically got taught through this whole experience of like, you know, with music, trying to release music or trying to make things happen and people thinking like festivals thinking like, we'll try to make it happen. Like maybe by then there won't be any more pandemic and maybe it's still worth releasing music and maybe we can try doing online, like all this trying. And then so much of it just bombing. So a lot of effort and money and no gain. And not only no gain, but then you were trying to like deal with like the people who had paid money for something that then wasn't happening. So you're trying to keep other people like reasonably happy.
Like organizational.
Oh my God. So there was that aspect, but then there was also like this long distance relationship that I was so serious about. So like it was more important to me than my career and it was so impossible and I just was working every day to try and make it possible to try and get across this impossible border and like I did make that happen but and it was I feel like our relationship was a success. Like it was a complete relationship, but it ended. Like after all that trying, it came to an end. That was like very mutual and amicable and made sense, but was like emotionally devastating after having just exerted every ounce of energy I had in a time where I actually had none. So I was like milking a stone to get anything I just have no energy. All I want to do is sleep. And so anything that actually manages to get done this year in my career is a miracle, an absolute miracle. And yet I'm committed to not quitting because things do keep happening and I will get the occasional like burst of energy to just get enough done to kind of make the next project happen. And I trust in this journey moving through this time. It's been a long time of apologizing to people for like things taking time. And that's always going to be a little bit true just from like chaotic slight disorganization that slips through the cracks of my strategies. But it has been like genuinely a very like disabling time for being able to have anything systematic in place to make a career happen.
Yeah. Have you thought about having a break?
Oh yeah,
Like
all
a
the
concerted
time.
break?
I just can't. Like,
How come?
I like.
Like for yourself, you mean, or there's other things that are like stopping you from doing that?
I think for myself, I think every time I try to dial it back, I get like locked onto an idea again. And that's what always pulls me back in is like, but I want to do this.
Have you like ever fully had a break before from music?
Nah.
Since you started?
Nah.
Interesting.
I've had like moments where I've definitely stepped back.
Yeah, but there's still...
Yeah, I would
bubbling.
say something that's been really healthy, like since I got back from America in 2021, was I started teaching again. And that's something I never considered doing when I was trying to forge ahead with my solo performing career, kind of being more like a touring artist.
Yeah.
Both because it actually felt like failure, which is so stupid. Felt like if I had to teach, that meant I'd failed as a performer. And it also felt logistically impossible because touring would mean I would have to abandon students so often. So now I'm striking this balance, and so that actually feels like a compromise between going cold turkey away from music. Because like midweek I get to really take a break from thinking about, you know, anything career, music. It's hard to separate these two because like teaching music is part of a music career. But when I say sort of like career, I'm thinking Monique Clare. I still do other performing and other music work that's outside of that. But I sort of think of that as like work, and then career is my sort of word for my creative output. So when I teach, it's such an antidote to the career sort of overwhelm, and like I have endless energy for teaching. It's lovely. And so that gives me a break every single week.
I maybe like I can share a little bit of my experience from I had an actual break for the first time ever.
Wow.
It was when I was getting sober, but I didn't touch an instrument for 3 months.
Cool.
Which I've never done ever since I've started playing music, probably. And it was so fucking scary to start with. The first few weeks. I was just like, I was literally like distraught. Yeah. I didn't really know what to do.
How did you enforce that?
I was like, I house sat for like 2
cool.
weeks.
Okay, so there was like a physical aspect
physical barrier.
to it. Yeah.
I'm like all about the old like physical, like zoning.
Did you ever
things.
find yourself like humming a melody and then you're like, no, stop?
It wasn't that extreme, but I definitely, it was also because I was like detoxing and shit. So it was like pretty hectic anyway. But like, I was in a completely different environment with like no instruments, just a little cat. And so I just read a lot of books and stuff. But that was like for the first 2 weeks. So I was like forced to not play things. Like I'd still listen to music and stuff here and there. But when I got back, because I was still in this mindset of being like, well, I'll just do like a chill music project. I'll just like make some beats or something. Like I don't have to like put much. I'm like, no. Like actually stop setting goals, stop trying. And it took me a while to get into it, but after that I was like, I'm just gonna wait at least like a month or two to kind of let myself just see what this feels like, because I know I'll miss it. I know I'll go back. I trusted that
I guess
I'd
the
come
cool
back,
thing about that is that you're kind of stopping everything in its tracks, so that it all loses momentum, and then when you're starting things up again, you're really actively choosing the things that are actually important to you and sustainable to keep doing, and going from there. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like I've done a version of that, but it's been like less cold turkey. I'm like a cold turkey person, just because I am very susceptible to dabbling all the time. Just like straight up frozen in there, like
6 months before Christmas kind of vibe. But yeah, it was pretty confronting.
Yeah.
But it taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Because I realized that music's always going to be there no matter what. And that I was in a period of burnout for like 2 or 3 years and didn't really realize.
Yeah.
Because I was like feeling that same way of like, I'm fucking tired all the time. I'm not even doing anything.
Yeah.
Or I was doing loads and just nothing, no matter how much I was doing, I was just like, I'm tired. Yeah. But not like always physically, like mentally, like, fuck, I can't keep it all in there, you know.
So so relatable.
Not that like that, you know, needs to happen, but I decided to bring it up because it's like, burnout's a weird thing because it's like, I didn't really realize. And then I was talking to my therapist heaps about it, of like the feelings I was having. And she's like, you're definitely burnt out, dude. Like, oh, really? Like, yeah. You're like,
it's like
so
I'm
fried.
A candle, but it's all kind of gone, like and there's just nothing left.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. So I am. Sweet. I'll just like not do anything for a while. And it helped heaps. But I know that's tricky when there's like, you have to think ahead a lot about like touring or releases or blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. I think I wish I quit in the pandemic and really freed myself from it, because that was like the worst time to be trying to forge ahead with a solo, like a fairly new project.
For sure.
And like, I just had this pressure that, you know, I guess I had put on myself, little bit co-created with other people, but that I was making a solo album, because I had started the process at the Banff residency at the start of 2019. And then I'd like already been recording it in 2019, and then I was going to be finishing it in 2020. And so at some point in 2020, when I still thought that the pandemic was going to end soon, I like crowdfunded it. And then that really felt like it locked me in to having to finish the project. And that was the worst feeling ever. Like, just literally people having pre-ordered your album to the point where like all of these people have accumulatively spent, how much did I raise? I think it was like it was more than $20,000. You know,
that's amazing.
And that's like really emotionally hard to just like shelve that and to say, hey everyone, can you just wait like 5 years?
Just chill, I got this.
I'm actually going to quit music. But like, and that's the thing, like, how can you quit something when you're like in the middle of a project like that's been funded, and quitting involves kind of like not knowing what the future's going to involve. So there's some element of like, you need to kind of like tie off your loose ends and then quit. Well,
did you have all the stuff like recorded by then, or
no?
Okay, so it was still like in progress in terms of tracking. When you were like, let's fund this baby. That's cool. Well, not cool, but that's the wrong word.
That's that.
That's that thing.
I don't even know what lesson to learn from that. Like, I sort of feel like I now wouldn't crowdfund something until I've like at least tracked everything and like kind of maybe like mixed it. And then, you know, maybe I still need to like have the last, like maybe make music videos and print them and figure out what I'm doing.
It's sort of that like second life of the like the finalization process or something, plus the visual language development kind of vibe. Maybe that's a lesson from it. It's hard though, because it's like that does give you motivation on a whole other level, but also a huge amount of pressure and a lot to live up to, and kind of this obligation that you had. And I remember seeing that and being like, interesting. We'll see. See how this goes. But not in like a not in like a ha 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 way, just in like a like I haven't been friends with an artist that is like going for that super hard.
Do you mean funding an album when it hasn't really been made yet?
Not even necessarily that. I mean, like, just like the crowdfunding thing on that level before. Like,
like crowdfunding so much money.
Like, I've had friends that have like crowdfunded to like press vinyl or something.
Sure.
A lot of people do that because it's like crazy outlay. But yeah, not to that extent. It was sort of to do a run of 50 or something, and that was it, to kind of get over the line. Whereas I feel like this was like sort of a much more project-based thing in terms of like, it was very, there was a lot of things that you were wanting to publish alongside it, which were all very like great resources, I feel, that were really important to kind of move alongside the music that you were writing.
Hang on, I just want to flag. I think it wasn't more than 20,000. I think I've gotten that figure from like maybe how much I think it was actually upwards of maybe like 13,000 or something like that. Yeah. I'm just not good at remembering numbers.
That's okay. It was like a very.
It was just like a lot of money.
Yeah. That's loads to people like us. Yeah. Which is like amazing because on one hand it shows all this support. Yeah. I've like not reached a goal once with thing, and I just like didn't do the project. Whoa. But it's because I funded it without like not really having a solid concept. So I've kind of done the same thing, just on a way smaller scale. If that makes you feel any better. No, but I mean, like, you got it done, which is a massive achievement. And I feel like people are very understanding of that. And I think it's,
Thank God. Thank God.
But I mean, like, I feel like it also, to me, because you're someone that's like, you're very honest and open about your life experience and experience as an artist on social media. And it's something that I envy because I analyze it way too much, but I also consume way too much of it. Yeah. So I'm like fucking myself over both times. Okay. So I'm trying to like get rid of it at the moment, for now, but like,
do you mean social media?
Yeah. Just like I need to stop looking at it. Yeah. It's fucking with my head too much. Yeah. But I
just make sure that my Instagram feed is full of like Japanese art.
Yeah. And I've tried doing all of this stuff, but I just keep seeing ads all the time. I just feel like I'm getting ads.
I feel like I've perfected the technique of detecting when it's an ad. Like if I'm scrolling, it's like in the first like second of seeing the little tile, it's like I quickly swipe past it. Right. I'm very good at it.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't got that talent yet.
I'm not trying to convince you to stay on social media.
No. My ads are very targeted, so all the ads are really good.
Oh,
it's like, new guitar pedal. Yeah. Cool. I'll buy that. And it's just like, it's the worst ever. Yeah. I'm like feeding that machine and then I'm getting it back. Yeah. But I feel like because you've been so transparent for so long, and I don't know whether that's a conscious choice or not, but I've dug it because it gives so much context. It gave so much context to that particular project of like, I'm fucking struggling with this element of it. This is why. This is how I feel right now.
You know the whole story.
Yeah, and I feel like that, not that you have to share everything if you don't want to, but I feel like that gave a lot of, I feel like that helped people understand everything, and so it got done in the time that it needed to get done, in terms of like you completed that project and the music got to people, so it was a success at the end of the day.
Wild and like it was genuinely a successful album, like in terms of
off. It's won awards, like
quantitative or qualitative. I think qualitative outcomes,
right?
Maybe rather than quantitative.
Yeah,
I can't say that word. Yeah. Like I've never really like looked at the Spotify streams and been like, oh yes, this is how many streams it's got, and this is compared to this artist. Blah, blah, blah. Because I just don't have the bandwidth for doing that. But like there have been meaningful outcomes from it, and then especially just things that people say, like, even if it's like a little kid whose parent is like, he listens to it like on repeat every day. Like that one song, he's just like obsessed with it. And like last night at the gig, one of my friends was like, oh yeah, can I bring my 4-year-old son? Like he wants to come to the Better Now gig. Like it's the Better Now show.
Okay, so he's associated that.
I'm not Monique Clare. I'm the Better Now show.
Person.
Like your person, whether it's that or someone might come up to me and be like, oh yeah, I've just like left my husband, and you know, it was quite a toxic relationship, and like your album just is getting me through it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy moly, like I know what it's like to have an album that's getting you through something.
Exactly.
And just the amount of gratitude you feel towards that artist for like having made that album, because I know how hard it is to make an album.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, thank you so much for making that album.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a bloody gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's I know I go through big periods of kind of forgetting that, but I feel like that's a really big thing to remember, is like once your music is shared with people, it's like you have no control over it, but it's also like it's going to affect people in ways you have absolutely no conception of. And that still freaks me the fuck out. But also lovely to hear those things. Yeah. I still struggle with like receiving it a lot. I have like horrible... I just like palm it off, even though it's like some really great feedback or something. Like, no.
It can't be real.
No, just like be mean to me. That's better. I can cop that, which is weird.
Caleb, you must practice self-love.
I know. I'm trying.
Just like that.
I know. Yeah. It's hard, but it's so weird because you go through this process of like, outpouring all this emotion and energy, and it can be very tough. And then sharing it is supposed to be this big celebration, and it's like
worst. It's the worst moment ever.
Yeah, it feels super weird. Like, but I feel like after a while, like once it's been out, it's sort of, I don't know. For me, I make my peace with it being out, and kind of it takes on this other life. Yeah, that you're not in control of anymore.
God, that's one of the hardest tasks in a creative music career, is trusting that if the thing that you've made is really good and valuable in this world, it like that will no, I don't even want to say this. I was going to say that will emerge at some time.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
as in the music,
like but then I am thinking of like really great music that always stays under the radar. Like, I think actually, I want to take that back, because like, I guess I just mean on like to a certain extent.
I know what you mean.
Just between like when you hit release, or when you know it's queued to release, you probably like won't see a big result then. Yeah. But you know, you might in a year's time. I don't know, like end up with some awesome outcome from it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Sorry, it took me a bit to understand that, but I know what you mean. I think release day is like one of the most underwhelming things in the entire universe. Definitely. And it kind of is, and that's cool. It's not really about that. It's like, yes, it's out. I was talking to Ash about this the other day. She's like, I just cried all day.
Oh, cool. That's like that. That's what I want to hear from like, because you know she is definitely someone who seems very successful in, you know, coming from our own city, and and you know that, like, I'm sure heaps of people are really envious of what seems like her success. And I've had conversations with other artists who I perceive as like incredibly, or they just are like some of the most successful artists out there. And they'll talk about a similar thing of like releasing something, and it's just the most devastating, underwhelming result from it. So it's so helpful to hear that. It sucks that like that's universal, but it's so good when you actually hear people open up about that. And
I feel like we all sort of going through some form of that. It's really weird, but it's also again like places. It's like where you're placing the emphasis, and it's like I know for me it's like it has to be the process has to be the thing that is giving me whatever I'm seeking.
It's just like has to happen in a way that is inherently fulfilling, otherwise
because that's the time, that's like what you're spending the most time on. And then the release thing, it's like you press a button, you know, it's like that takes no time, but is.
And how would anyone just like know about it on the day?
I know,
like,
right?
Even if you've ticked all the right boxes with like promoting it.
Yeah. It's like you have to have an insane budget, and labels they'll sit on a release for 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, that's like a, you know, potentially dangerous path to go down.
It's like, I don't want to do that. It's like once I'm ready with a song or an album, whatever, it's like it'll go up when like obviously within reason. I feel like I've seen a lot of people rush the fuck out of releases because they're like over working on it.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you really are like kind of fucking yourself over a bit by doing that. Because now no one knows, but it's also like you can, once something is out, you can talk about it a lot and that does build momentum. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's like not about the first couple of weeks. It's like,
it's about like
the longevity
years
of
after, like just keeping on kind of ticking away at stuff.
For sure.
Yeah,
definitely. Maybe when you're feeling good about the next album, we can go like deep into it, because I don't want to like spoil anything or anything like that. But there is one coming, because you did say that last night. So
well, unless I quit music, you know, like
I love how you just keep referencing quitting. It's like, unless I quit, then Which is, look, it's like, as much as we joke about that, I think it's like, I completely understand. I think it's like not a bad way to, because it's like you're holding this thing. It's okay if it goes, and it probably won't.
It really probably
won't quit, but it's like, it's okay to be like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think now that I have released Sight, like my first album, I do feel this freedom that I could quit if I wanted to.
Right.
Like, I feel like I've put something out that's meaningful. I know I have more in me. And I have, like, it would feel really sad to quit at this point without having kind of seen all these ideas through and everything. Yeah. But I also feel like so much more peaceful about that. And it's even just good to like know that it's an option. Yeah. At this stage. Yeah. That almost is like helpful to keep going.
I understand.
To know that I could quit if I wanted to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel that. Yeah. I kind of went through that process earlier in the year, just being like, it's all right if I don't go back to this. I don't know what I'd do, but I'd be pretty bored, I think. So then I just made some more music, and it's all good. But yeah, I think that's like, it's a good thing to just remind yourself of. Yeah. Of like, it's okay to not, I think it's such an industry pressure thing of like, you must keep churning all this stuff, and it's like, it's all right to
I think for me, what it'll probably look like throughout my life is just a series, a sort of landscape of like dialing up and dialing down. Yeah. And there'll always be this mix, unless things radically change for me, there'll always be this mix of making my own music and seeing through my own projects and organising things. There'll be education involved, whether that's private teaching or working with schools, something like that. There'll be plants somehow. Yeah. Like I can't really get away from plants now. I just like love them too much. Yeah. And you know, there'll be like some gigs or music-y things that I'll do that are totally mindless, but just for viability, like for money. Yeah. And that's just a big old ecosystem that can really flex with time. I can do more teaching if I really need to. I can do less teaching and go touring more. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to go. I'm kind of moving towards a similar path after trying every other fucking variation of that, including not working in the music industry at all, and like brewing beer, and then realizing that was very bad for me. But I had to go do that to realize, like you were saying before. But sweet. Do you want to leave it there? I feel like we could chat for a bit.
I feel like the theme is how good is learning?
How good is learning? You can quit at any time.
And orchestras and classical musicians need to talk about. They
got to get into the 21st century. Need to talk
about the music that they're making.
Yeah, I do that. That's some good lessons.
Yeah.
Thanks, Monique.
Thanks, Caleb.